We find ourselves in First Thessalonians, and that's how you say it, Thessalonians. This is Paul's first letter to the church in Thessalonica, which is modern day Thessaloniki, Greece. Um, I've been there. It's a bustling port city, and it was in those days too. And it's not only a port city, but it also sits on a major trading route, or sat on a major trading route road. This is a large city. This was larger than a lot of the places that we read about in the New Testament. So Thessalonica. So the interesting thing, I think, the most interesting thing about First Thessalonians is that this was written in about 50 AD, which makes it chronologically the first book of the New Testament written. So you say, wait, hang on a second. The first book of the New Testament written, weren't the Gospels talking about Jesus himself? So wouldn't they be the first ones written? Well, if you remember when we read the Gospels, we said that Mark, the earliest one, was probably written perhaps 60 AD, and then the other ones were after that. So those were recalling events of decades before. First Thessalonians was the first New Testament book written. It is the oldest existing piece of Christian literature that we have. And by a couple of years, probably at most. So it's not like it's way before anything else, but it still is the first. If nothing else, this one gives us kind of a glimpse into what the earliest Christians were up to, what they thought life was about, what Christianity was about. So there's not a whole lot, frankly, in First Thessalonians that just really jumps off the page and says this is unique, and we must look at every last little detail. But it is, I mean, it's just as much scriptural as anything else. But it's generally a letter of encouragement to a church for which Paul has this particular affection. He calls himself kind of like a mother or father away from their orphan child when he's writing this because he's not with them. So he clearly has a particular affection for them. Originally, he went to Thessalonica with Silas. The letters addressed from Silvanus, which is Silas. And then later he sent Timothy, who is sort of his protege, and we'll talk a little bit more about Timothy in some books coming later. But it's just kind of demonstrates that Paul was not this lone wolf missionary. He was a leader of a missionary team, especially in the earlier days. There are no explicit quotations from the Old Testament in First Thessalonians. The community was almost entirely Gentiles. Remember, Gentile just means someone who's not Jewish. It does touch a little bit on the concept of the Old Testament, I guess, but or the concept of Israel, I guess I should say. But there's no specific quotations. Thessalonica probably didn't have very many Jews, and so it wouldn't have done much for him to. It wouldn't have been a very good tool to use, just quoting the Old Testament like he did in other places. And again, this is Paul, as he's done, as we've seen several times, writing to his audience. So that's First Thessalonians. Happy reading.